Okay, so we talk a ton about the power of artificial intelligence, right? But what if the biggest hurdle to getting AI right isn't the technology at all? What if really it's us? Today, we're diving into the hidden psychological traps that cause even the most promising AI projects to crash and burn. I mean, you've seen the headlines, you've heard the stories. A company sinks millions of dollars into some groundbreaking AI initiative only for it to completely fizzle out, underdeliver, or, fail spectacularly. So why does this keep happening over and over again? Well, the answer, as it turns out, often has very little to do with the algorithms or the hardware. The real problem, it's human. It really boils down to two sneaky psychological traps that can trip up even the smartest people in the room. All right, first up, the overconfidence trap. This is a really dangerous bias, and it's driven by a psychological phenomenon you've probably heard of before, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Basically, it's that thing where having just a little bit of knowledge makes you feel like you know a whole lot. It creates that, I've read a few articles, so now I'm basically an expert kind of mindset. And when you're dealing with something as deep and complex as AI, let me tell you, that is a recipe for absolute disaster. And you can see how these characteristics create this vicious cycle, right? You get overconfident, which creates these huge blind spots, so you literally can't see your own incompetence. And that makes you brush off the people who are genuine experts. You end up mistaking just being familiar with the buzzword AI for having a deep, real understanding of what it actually takes to make it work. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. Check this out. Take the case of a retail CEO who went to one AI conference and then came back and made this just wild proclamation. He was totally convinced he could revolutionize the company overnight. And when his own tech team, the actual experts, raised some pretty valid concerns, he just blew them off, called it resistance to change. So what happened next? Well, it was a total and honestly a pretty predictable catastrophe. The new system was rushed out without enough data or nuance, and it just drove customers crazy. Satisfaction dropped by, get this, 42%. A 42% nosedive. The company actually had to scramble and hire a bunch of temporary staff just to stop the bleeding. So how did they fix it? The project was only salvaged when leadership finally had to eat some humble pie, scale everything way back, and guess what? Listen to the exact same experts they had ignored from the very beginning. A super painful, and let me tell you, a very, very expensive lesson in humility. Okay, so that overconfidence often leads directly into the second big psychological trap, what we're calling the AI savior myth. This is what happens when leaders stop seeing AI as a useful tool and start treating it like it's some kind of miracle cure. This is all driven by a bias that psychologists call the Messiah effect. And we usually think of this applying to a person, right? Like a charismatic leader. But the exact same logic gets applied to technology. The whole organization starts to believe that AI, all on its own, is just going to swoop in and magically fix these really deep, messy, systemic problems. And the warning signs for this are actually pretty easy to spot. You start hearing all this talk of revolution, you see timelines and ROI numbers that are they're way too good to be true, right? And here's the big one. You see people trying to use AI like a fancy, high-tech Band-Aid to just patch over fundamental problems, like terrible data or totally broken processes. Here's another real-world example. There was this financial firm that was really struggling, and they became convinced that a new AI platform was their silver bullet. Their stated goal, and this is a classic sign of that savior thinking, was to eliminate human error. You see, they weren't just adopting a new tool, they were looking for a technological messiah. And the price tag on this belief? Whoa. They sank a jaw-dropping $15 million into this savior AI. And the whole time, they were completely ignoring their own tech team who kept waving red flags saying, hey, our fundamental data is a total mess. This isn't going to work. So you can probably guess how this story ends. You feed a sophisticated AI messy, biased data, and what you get out is garbage. It started making these truly disastrous recommendations. And the only way to move forward was to finally do the hard foundational work they had tried to use all that expensive tech to avoid in the first place.
Okay, so now here's where things get really, really dangerous. These two biases, Dunning-Kruger and the Messiah complex, they don't just exist separately. No, they feed on each other. And they combine to create what is basically a perfect storm of terrible decision-making.
Yeah, this really is the perfect storm. So on one side, you have the overconfident leader thinking, you know what, I know better than my own experts about what AI can and can't do. And at the same time, you have the savior-seeking leader who's thinking, this AI is so transformative, so magical, that there are no limitations. See? Both mindsets lead to the exact same disastrous outcome. The crucial on-the-ground advice from the technical experts just gets completely thrown out the window.
So, okay, if overconfidence and savior-seeking are the paths to failure, what does the path to success actually look like? Well, it's all about finding a much more balanced, a much more grounded path for AI adoption. And the whole key, the big shift in thinking, is to move from replacement to partnership. It all starts by having a healthy respect for what each side, the AI and the human, really brings to the table. Look, AI is absolutely phenomenal for crunching massive amounts of data and spotting patterns we'd never see. But humans, we provide the stuff that's irreplaceable: context, ethical judgment, and creative problem solving.
And when you embrace that partnership model, a really clear 4-step strategy starts to emerge. First, instead of some vague goal like we need to use AI, you start with a very specific, well-defined problem. Second, you bring everyone to the table, especially the folks who will actually be using the tech. Third, you roll it out in phases, iteratively, so you can learn and adapt as you go. And finally, you keep your expectations realistic and you talk openly about the challenges. It's about evolution, not revolution.
And we know this approach works. It's not just theory. We saw a great case with a manufacturing firm that did exactly this. They picked one single clear problem: predictive maintenance, and they involved everyone, from the people on the factory floor all the way to the data scientists. They started small, they learned from it, and then they scaled it up successfully. No overconfidence, no savior complex, just smart, humble, collaborative work.
So as you go back to your own world, ask yourself this: which of these hidden biases is the bigger threat where you are right now? Is it the overconfidence of maybe not knowing what you don't know? Or is it that magical thinking, that hope that some new technology is going to be your savior? Because honestly, just being able to recognize the trap, that is the first and most critical step to making sure you don't fall into it.